Hello noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and oh boy, what have I found? So today we are on History Enhanced, and my dear friends, enhanced history, it is on this website in the sense that they add a lot of nonsense. In fact, look at this article over here. Liar, liar, history's biggest lies and scams ever told. Yeah, that is a fantastic representation of the entire website. Life in the Middle Ages was downright medieval. Why do I do this to myself? That is a gorgeous picture of a castle. Focus on the positive. 17 terrifying facts. Already the usage of the word fact, take it loosely. Facts. Right. We're going to read through 17 different facts, and I'm not going to follow a logical numerical order because logics are outside of my life. There's no more logics, so might as well. Have a seat, you muppet. Number 1, there were witch hunts. Salem, Massachusetts doesn't have a monopoly on witch hunts. In fact, witch hunts were a thing in Europe long before Sarah Good, Rebecca Nurse and other in Pilgrim-era Salem were accused of practicing witchcraft. Thousands of people in medieval Europe, mostly women, were accused of using dark magic and being in cahoots with the devil. Roughly half of the accused witches were executed, often in truly awful ways. So this already, nonsense. In the majority of witch hunts, I'm talking about most of witch hunts, witch trials, and all of that occurred after the Middle Ages. So this is nonsense. Did it ever occur during the medieval period that sometimes people were accused? Yes. But witch hunts, specifically all of the witch trials in the thousands that happened in Europe, absolutely post-medieval. We are not starting strong. Just putting it out there. The brutality of war. Medieval weapons were designed to inflict a lot of damage. I think you can say that. Literally, you can take this, copy-paste, remove medieval, and put any weapon. Modern weapons are designed to inflict a lot of damage. Stone Age weapons were designed to inflict a lot of damage. When used in hand-to-hand combat. Swords, maces, battle axes, and flails could crush bones and split open skulls. Yes, if a warrior's battlefield wound didn't kill him right away, infection probably would. Some medieval warlords, like Vlad the Impaler, did some gruesome things to his defeated enemies in order to send a message to others. He famously impaled hundreds of thousands of people to show his enemies that he meant business. Brutality of war is a constant throughout the entirety of humankind, so as per the title of your video, not a downright medieval thing of the Middle Ages. Houses were drafty and cold. It didn't matter if you were a noble living in a medieval... No, oh my gosh. And they're using that incredible castle to one in Spain. What are you on about? You're telling... Oh my gosh. It didn't matter if you were a noble living in a medieval castle or a peasant living in a thatched roofed cottage. Yeah, the exact same thing. All houses in the Middle Ages were drafty and cold. You've got to be joking. Yeah, I would give anything to live in this, by the way. Now, right now, I would leave the comfort of my home. I would move here, given I would put a little stove, but I mean... Oh, this is insane. Okay, they say medieval. This is a 12th century castle, although then again, the final pattern of the walls is probably already, I want to say 16th century. This has been expanded on top of, like, it had original Roman fort. It's a beautiful castle, by the way. I should make a dedicated video. It had an original Roman fort location. Then the Muslims built on that, probably a wooden fortification, wooden fort with wooden palisades. Then there is the Reconquista. Then they move, the nobles start living there, and so they start expanding it, building upon it. 12th century, early 13th century starts to look a bit like that. And then they keep expanding and growing until you have even these Herrerian-style walls plus the moat. Yes, but this is gorgeous. Anyways, castles were often damp and hard. Hard? I agree. It's very hard material. Absolutely. I don't know what they were thinking. They should have made them of, like, soft tissue damage. The cottages were crowded, poorly ventilated, and leaky. All homes in the Middle Ages were infested with rats and mice. Source, please? All homes. All homes. Gosh, this is insane. Fires for hot heating and cooking made the air smoky and difficult to breathe. Oh, she plays Valheim. There were no bathrooms, no running water. She has a point there, that's correct. Yeah, there were no bathrooms in the modern sense. No running water. No air conditioning, absolutely no heat. Well, if we really have to get technical, fires are heat. I'm just saying, okay, I'm just saying. I'm going to be pedantic today because today I'm one of those pedantic mornings. Just so you know, you're already typing, Metatron, you're so pedantic, obnoxious, condescending. Yeah, I'm pedantic. I'm pedantic. That's why you subscribed anyways. Let's not fool each other. You're pedantic too. So, my dear pedantic brother, fires are a source of heat. Hence, the statement, no heat, is incorrect by your own words. A terrible life expectancy rate. Oh, we're going to go into that one, are we? There were a lot of things that could kill a person in the Middle Ages, including childhood. Toothaches. I don't think toothaches would kill a person, to be honest. I mean, prove me wrong. Be more than happy to learn from it, but how does a tooth, unless someone is like so fed up with it that they smash their own head against a wall, then I guess, indirectly, tainted water and bucking horses. Diseases were rampant. Smallpox, tuberculosis, flu, malaria, dysentery, and typhoid, all diseases we can now treat, were virtually death sentences in the Middle Ages, depending on the context. I have a dedicated video, by the way. Between 25% and 50% of children died before they reached the age of 5 years old. Yet, in the Middle Ages, there was a high child mortality, that's correct. Poorer the child, yes, the higher the death rate, absolutely. In fact, the percentages very much vary depending on, because of course, access to nutrition, access to period medicine, which I get it, it's not as great as modern medicine. I'm surprised they don't have a thing. Medieval medicine was horrible compared to today. Well, no SHIT, Sherlock. But yeah, so sure, but still better than nothing. But everyone was at risk. According to one statistics, boys born to land-owning families in medieval England could expect to live until the ripe old age of 31 years old. Absolute, complete, total, utter garbage nonsense. People don't understand averages. People don't understand averages. Infant mortality is the reason why the averages are low, because it skews the data towards, because if you got a certain percentage of the population that dies before even getting past the age of 5, or even infant mortality in general, birth, childbirth, then of course the number you're gonna get, which is an average, is gonna be on the low end. 31 still being insane, but it's gonna be on the low end. Still, that it doesn't mean that, oh my gosh, you'd be lucky if you reach 31. No, that's not what it means, because now people are gonna think, oh my gosh, so if you were like 35, you were an old geezer, governor. To 29, you're already thinking, oh, I'm about to die because most people die. No, that's not how that works. That's not how that works. The way that works is that as long as you survive your infancy, then there was a high chance that you could get into your 70s. That's what that means. Because there was a high level of children mortality, then what that means is that the averages are skewed. And so, yeah, there is an average. There's usually like in the middle somewhere. But once again, people don't know how to interpret averages. It's like, I don't know why it's so deep. Well, I know why, because there are websites that spread this nonsense. And let's continue with the myths. The lack of sanitation and hygiene. Life in the Middle Ages was an assault on the nose. This has been debunked so many times that I think it's actually, it's impressive that whoever this writer is found a source that actually still repeated this nonsense. Bathhouses were extremely common. People washed, people bathed, noblemen even more so, but even the common people went down to the river. We've got all of the sources about that. Anyways, routine bathing was only done by the wealthy elite. Not true. Peasants carried an aroma of body odor around with them. Not true. Most people had head lice, body lice, and other creepy crawlies living on them. I imagine some people would have had that, yes. Medieval cities didn't have sewage systems or garbage removal. As a result, the gutters and alleys were filled with human and animal excrement, trash, and animal corpses that would be removed. And there was a job, by the way, that took care of excrement removal. Not a job I would like to have, given, but if the job exists, as I mentioned, on a dedicated video, link in the description, not dedicated to excrement, dedicated, you know what I mean, dedicated to jobs. If the job existed, it means that the excrement wasn't left to rot in the middle. I mean, raker is a term that appears in 14th century England to indicate a person whose job was to dean cesspit. The absence of a functioning sewage system made it necessary to periodically empty the cesspits to avoid the onset of diseases, and in the mid-14th century at least one raker was assigned to each district of London who, after emptying the pits, was responsible of disposing of the excrement in the Thames or outside the city perimeter. These cesspits were very seldomly maintained, which means that the thing could fall on you, you could break a piece, you could really injure yourself. In London's coroner rolls of 1326, the death of a certain Richard the Raker is reported, who, while using the latrine he was working on, had fallen into the cesspit below following the breaking of the floorboards, ending up drowning in the excrement. Anyways. Not only did it smell horrible, but it attracted rats and insects that spread diseases. Serfs were indentured servants. In the Middle Ages, much of Europe operated on a serfdom system. The system worked well for the wealthy landowners, but not so much for the serfs. They were required to work in the landowner's field, forests and mines in exchange for the privilege of living in a small cottage on his land. Serfs were obliged to give much of the food they raised to the landed lord, leaving them with barely enough to feed their own families. That's nonsense. Under the serfdom system, there was no pathway out of poverty for the serfs. That's also nonsense. In fact, it was a generational thing. Generation after generations were stuck in the same cycle of bondage. Where do I even begin? The figure of the peasant during the early Middle Ages began to take shape already in the late Roman era, with the birth of the practice of colonatus, an exponential growth in the maintenance cost of the military and bureaucratic structure, together with an ever-decreasing influx of slaves caused by exponential decrease in conquest campaigns, had already put the late Roman imperial economy in crisis during the 3rd century AD. Along with these factors, barbarian incursions and slave revolts had produced a depopulation and impoverishment of the countryside, bringing the empire dangerously close to economic collapse. To remedy the production crisis, which evidently, especially in agriculture, could no longer be based on slave labor, landowners found themselves reforming rural work, which began to rely more and more on labor provided by free men, the so-called coloni. The landowner would enter into a contract with the colony, allowing them to keep a portion of the agricultural production of the estate for their own subsistence and that of their family, in exchange for the rest of the cultivated products and various services, which in the future would be defined as corvée. The authorities created a law that dictated that once the colony had entered into a contract, they would be bound to the land and could no longer withdraw and abandon the estate. Well, technically, I would imagine that we could say that they did have the freedom to decide to enter into a contract with this specific landowner, but the thing is that by law, once they did enter into that contract, then they did not have the freedom to leave it or break it. So it's a bit more nuanced. The importance of the peasant class is recognized in Adalberon's Carmen itself, which in fact states that, open quotes, wealth and clothing are provided to all by the work of peasants, and no free man could live without them. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much. The peasants revolted from time to time. Yeah, that's revolting. I think it's an excellent term. Serfs and peasants, people who made up the lower rungs of society, suffered the most under the feudal system. Once again, it very much depends. There were very successful peasants. There were, in fact, wealthy peasants as well. This idea that all peasants are living in, they're basically slaves, and it's not true. It's not true. It's like you have to build up this idea of, oh, they were oppressed. Sure, it wasn't like it was a society that had a big difference between the rich and the poor. So do we today, by the way. Every so often they revolted against their unfair lot in life. Peasants' uprising usually happened suddenly without warning. Yes, but they also happen because of specific socioeconomic conditions. So usually the peasants, well, in general, people rebel when they can't afford food, they are poor, they're struggling. So now peasants were taxed a lot, as we discussed already. With that being said, it was advantageous for the upper class to make sure the population was relatively happy. And there were conditions in which peasants were making a good profit, and they also had quite a bit of holidays that we don't have today. For instance, you don't work the land in winter, so there's that. Although they were triggered by increases in taxes or incidents of general injustice. Yeah. When the peasants revolted, violence spread from village to village or serfdom to serfdom. The peasants had valid points to be made about the forced labor and terrible injustices they endured, but nearly all of the medieval peasant revolts were quickly and brutally suppressed by the people in power. Participants in the revolts were publicly executed. Yeah, on the public execution, absolutely authorities in the medieval period went nuts with the quartering, for instance. That, I would agree. The church micromanaged everyone's lives. In medieval Europe, the all-powerful church was omnipresent in the lives of all the people. From the lowliest peasants to the kings and queens, church doctrines controlled much of people's day-to-day decision-making and routines. Well, they tried. The church also served as a filter for information going to the general public. Knowledge of scientific discoveries and ideas were suppressed. The church even controlled who could get an education because it suited their needs to keep the masses uneducated. Well, yeah, I mean, public access to universities. I mean, universities date back to the Middle Ages. Let's not push this idea of the Dark Ages and nobody could study and nobody knew anything. So let's not do that. Of course, a big chunk of the population were farmers, and so a farmer doesn't need to learn Latin. Because a farmer needs to farm the land. I understand it's a different situation, of course, and a lot of people didn't have much choice within the system. But let's not think that everyone was ignorant. Once again, a lot of universities date back to the medieval period. If people could not read the Bible on their own, they were forced to accept the lessons taught to them by the clergy at face value. Yeah, this idea of micromanaging, the church absolutely tried, but if you look, it's not always that these instructions were followed. And even if you think about not just small things like a priest telling you to do something, we're talking about a papal bull. For example, when the Pope decided to ban crossbows and bows. People always forget that. Oh, they banned crossbows, which means they were the most powerful ranged weapon. That they banned bows too. So there was this famous papal bull, the Pope saying, no, you shouldn't use it on other Christians. By the way, that's the only case in which they were banned. But he said you shouldn't use it on other Christians because it's too powerful. Too many people die at a distance, so don't use it. Which is kind of funny because it also means, but you can spear a fellow Christian to death. It's fine. You can mace them in the head and bash their head in, but not the crossbow. Not the bow. Regardless, they ignored it, and the majority of countries ignored it anyways. It's not like they tried, but it didn't always work. Random attacks by marauding invaders. People living in coastal regions of Europe were vulnerable to random, sudden, and unprovoked attacks from seafaring marauders, particularly the Vikings. Well, no, the Vikings is before. It's in the Viking period. It's not in the medieval period. Unless you want to consider the early Middle Ages, I guess. Well, the Vikings, right, in the Viking Age, the Vikings quickly discovered that there was a wealth of resources in the villages and towns that sprang up in coastal areas. Remote and sparsely populated, these villages were easy pickings for Viking raiders. All they had to do was to sail to one of these places and start pillaging and plundering. It wasn't all good-natured robbery. Women were word, children were captured, men were killed. Viking raids left people living in constant fear. Right. Trial by ordeal. In the Middle Ages, judges used trials by ordeal to determine the guilt or innocence of the accused instead of considering the factual evidence. The courts believed that God would step in and reveal the truth while the accused was forced to endure an ordeal. Now, given, I'm not going to be here and try to defend the idea of trial by ordeal by any means. I do want to underline, however, just for precision, that usually it was after considering the factual evidence, if the evidence was inconclusive, that they would do this. Just for context. For example, the accused might be tossed into a freezing cold body of water, yeah, like a river. If he sank and drowned, it was declared innocent. If he floated and survived, it was found guilty and punished. I think you're getting it wrong. It's usually they float. I mean, it depends. Often by execution, similar trials by ordeal saw accused people forced to hold red-hot iron in their hands and walk through fire. Yeah, I mean, this one is fine, I suppose. Right, so anyways, I think I've read enough the things I do for you noble ones. Anyways, if you enjoyed this, I don't know why you would, but if you did, enjoy my pain. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.